Hey there, Cosmic Warriors, and welcome back to another video. And if you are new here, my name is Hannah. I'm a Western Practical Astrologer. All right, so today we are going to be discussing the Trinity of the soul. Yes, we're going to be exploring the houses of emotion and soul in astrology. I hope that you find the information to be helpful and useful today. And if you do, certainly be sure to give the video a like. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Subscribe for more. Right, before we do dive in, however, if you would like to learn more about astrology, then head on over to the Cosmic Check-In podcast, and you can also pick up a copy of my astrology cheat sheets available on my website, hannahselsewhere.com. Plus, you can book a reading with me by going to my website as well. And here's the other thing I want to highlight, that if you want to learn more about the houses in astrology, I have dedicated an episode on my podcast to each of the houses. Go to episodes 22 through to 33. Thank you so much. Right, what we're going to do first then is we're going to explore these houses. What is the Trinity of emotion, of soul, all about? So see here that this Trinity is comprised of the 4th, the 8th, and 12th houses. So as our spirit helps us connect with divinity, our soul is said to be eternal. Our soul is our very being, helping us transcend to higher levels of consciousness. We're not typically aware of these parts. So if we explore the 4th house to begin with, the 4th house here, if you notice, is at the very root, the very bottom of the wheel of the chart. If you can imagine that the houses are surrounding this, right? Yes. So basically, the 4th house represents emotions and feelings, helping us navigate our emotional body and hunches. Our emotions give us information about the world, right? So they give us information about the world, triggers, reactions. Feelings are really how we interpret our emotions then. So imagine the 4th house as acting as the seat of the soul, if you will, acting as the root for spiritual growth, right? So it's from here that this really begins. It's at the root of our spiritual growth and our intuition. But also notice that the 4th house is about how we are raised, our emotional conditioning, our emotional sort of programming. The 3rd house, naturally the house before the 4th, is so much about our intellect and how our mind is programmed or conditioned. But the 4th house is more about the emotional body. And so what do? We learn this from our caregivers. The 4th house is also massively about our own safety and comforts and needs. Then we come to the 8th house, and the 8th house represents the repressed self, acting as the parts of the self, right? The self being the 1st house, that we deny and we perhaps deem as scary or perhaps as inappropriate. You think about taboo, controversy tied to the 8th house, right? Potential trauma is shown here. We free ourselves by facing ourselves, feeling pain, opening our hearts, and confronting our ego. This within itself is a process that cannot be rushed, certainly cannot be rushed. And the 8th house is also linked to the supernatural, connecting with the other side. It's connected to death, or it's associated with death, really. The 8th house rules death, loss, and rebirth. We see here transformation. But the other thing then about the 8th house is it's so much about our deeper bonds, intimacy, and those kinds of deeper connections. And so what we come up against via the 8th house, well, is emotional issues. And what we do is we can then transform through such experiences. All right, moving on then to finally the 12th house. The 12th house represents the collective unconscious, acting as the non-physical. How we are connected spiritually is really shown here. All of humanity's pain, suffering, love, and connection. Soul bonds and reincarnation. All of these things fall under this 12th house arena. We go beyond the self. We go beyond the physical. And we also can hopefully identify with the hidden self or hidden parts, the unconscious. And then what we do through such an integrating process or learning process is we learn mighty spiritual lessons. The final thing, though, about the 12th house, I suppose, is many astrologers will associate it with past lives, things like that. So I wanted to highlight that that's another area to consider based on the astrologer that you work with. Okay, so see here that each of these houses, they are connected by trines. And this highlights opportunity. This highlights more of this harmonious energy flow between the houses. And so what you want to do is you want to think about what planets, what placements you have in those houses, how do they connect to each other by a trine, what is the energy exchange, what is the energy flow. Talents can show up here, gifts can show up here, particularly emotional, spiritual gifts, intuitive gifts, things like that. And then also keep in mind that transits can trigger this trine, right? Can activate this trine. Transits can essentially activate any of the trines or the squares that we have discussed so far throughout this houses series. All right, so now we have explored this trinity. I want to highlight that make sure to read for your rising sign. We're going to be using the whole sign system to make this more simplified. I get that people use different house systems, but if you can, please just read for your rising as we use the whole sign system. With that in mind, yes, your unique chart matters. All right. So with all of that being said, let's now get into the signs. Thank you so much for watching. All right, first up we have Capricorn Risings. Yes, Capricorn Risings. Let's discuss these emotional houses for you. Of course, you have fire signs within these emotional houses, speaking to your fiery emotional reactions, speaking to maybe how you can defend yourself within emotional situations, or considering how you might take action based on your emotions too. So you've got Aries in the 4th house here, this Mars influence. What this suggests is that you tend to stay in your own lane within your home and family circle. You have very little patience for loved ones who tell you how to live. Being independent is a necessity if you are to survive and to set up a home for yourself. So, for example, this could involve you running into a few disputes and arguments with particular family members, or maybe you come to a point throughout your life where you go, no, I'm not dealing with that. Or this could look like you being very independent from a rather young age, right? That's another thing. And maybe because of self-sufficiency, or because you were forced to be pretty independent in that you had to take on certain tasks and responsibilities. And naturally, this could also show up as the very minute that you could move out of your family home, you did it. With that in mind, this can also suggest that this emotional sort of conditioning is, well, it's equally associated with how maybe your parents instilled in you this leadership. this drive, this independence. So even if there were, right, challenges, disputes, arguments, and so on, maybe you can still take something away from that and kind of go, well, you know what? I'm a really hard worker today. I can fend for myself today, etc. With that in mind, locate Mars, because Mars is certainly going to speak to this. It's going to speak to your drive, your independence, and your family life. Then we come to the 8th house, and you've got Leo there, the sun influence ruling the 8th house. So although you might soak up the attention your intimate partners, your intimate relationships bring, you do not shy away from expressing your pleasures and your interests. Your individuality must be taken into consideration. So this is where we see when we consider maybe emotional challenges, emotional issues that are triggered through intimacy, right? We can see this, perhaps this feeling like you need to defend your position, or like you need to be listened to, you need to be seen, you need to be heard, and you need to be validated. So what this can suggest perhaps are transformations tied to your ego, or transformations tied to attention and tied to your individuality. So this can naturally show up as a more challenging thing. For example, feeling like, you really need to protect yourself if at any moment you feel like you're being disregarded or dismissed. And then it's a question of, well, where could that be stemming from? Where could that be coming from? But then at the same time, this could equally be about maybe tapping into your inner child, play, fun, pleasure, right? Following your interests. This could be a part of your emotional growth. This could be a part of your transformational process, Capricorn Risings. Do locate the sun though, because the sun is going to add more to the story, right? Lastly, let's think about Sagittarius in the 12th house, this Jupiter influence ruling the 12th. By integrating parts of the self that are open-minded, expansive, explorative, and fair, you can jump into new opportunities, even if they don't align with your very set in stone future plans. Basically, you can consider other options, because what I imagine here is, with this Capricorn influence in the first, we could see this rigidness. We could see this complete plan in place, this complete certainty, and having certain standards and expectations. And it's not about, right, not having those, but equally, I'm thinking that by integrating the Sagittarius part of yourself more, this can show up as you considering what other options might be available to you. This could be about going after a new opportunity, a new vision, a new role, a new dream, something that inspires you, right? And so there could be those themes to do with just going for it, taking a leap of faith, or maybe it's about addressing particular challenges to do with religion, dogma, what could have been pushed onto you growing up, what is a part of your belief system, but equally what isn't. This could be a part of your inner exploration, which naturally is tied to something more spiritual. With that in mind, locate Jupiter. Jupiter is going to add more layers to this. Thank you so much, Capricorn Risings. And now we are going to move on to Taurus Risings. All right, Taurus Risings, let's explore these emotional houses for you. How might they show up? Keep in mind that the fire signs are located in these emotional houses, speaking to maybe this fiery quality, speaking to a lot of energy and passion and expression that really go into your emotions. So you've got Leo in the fourth, the sun influence ruling the fourth. And what this suggests about you is that you possess a mighty will to develop your own identity, which is separate from your family's identity. But simultaneously, you long for warmth, affection, and praise from your loved ones. So it's this type of thing of being able to establish yourself independently outside of the home, right? To be an individual, to consider what your interests are, what your values are with relation to family and home and where you live, right? Around roots. But at the same time, if there are certain connections that you have to family, certain traditions that you make with family, then it's honoring those, right? It's honoring those. It's really loving those things as well. I think this is truly where the placement of the sun comes into this, because if the sun is in more of a challenging spot, or if there are certain aspects being made to the sun that challenge it in some way, yeah, I mean, it could, for example, show up as things being more domineering or challenging or confronting. But it could also be where if the sun is in more of a harmonious, if it's in this harmonious position, this could speak to feeling more safe and settled and secure within your home. Whatever this is, though, with Leo in the fourth, it really does highlight this feeling of, I belong. I belong. I'm seen. I'm loved. I'm appreciated. And then there's also that type of warmth that you give off. There's this generosity. You may just love spending time with your family, honestly. Certain family members you get on really well with. You love it. It brings you so much joy. It makes you happy. Again, you want to locate the sun for more information. And this is also where your emotional conditioning comes into play, where in which it's that feeling of closeness with loved ones that could really matter to you. Okay, let's move on. Let's think about the eighth house. You've got Sagittarius in the eighth house, this Jupiter influence ruling the eighth. And so, what this can suggest is that by searching for the meaning behind why you act or do things, you discover more about the past and people in your life. And it's these certain discoveries that can help further you and can lead you to really open up and to be honest within close relationships. Maybe what you truly desire deep down when it comes to intimacy, vulnerability, is openness. It's this honesty to explore maybe your hopes and dreams, to explore your aspirations, to be truthful, and maybe as well to be aligned with relation to the likes of religion, politics, beliefs, right? Those are the types of things that could come into effect here. And it could also be where it's through this inner exploration, right? This self exploration where you're learning so much about yourself and why you do the things you do, how you interact within relationships, right? It's this analysis that can help you expand and grow within intimate relationships as well. But even through that process, you could very well find that you've outgrown particular intimate relationships or desires within intimate relationships too. So there is that. What you want to consider then is locating Jupiter, because Jupiter is going to add a lot more detail to what I'm saying. It's not going to be so black and white, what the information that I'm saying today. Yeah, locate Jupiter, see what kind of condition Jupiter is in. Okay, so finally, let's look to the 12th house. You've got Aries there, this Mars influence ruling the 12th. Basically, by integrating parts of the self that are independent and self-assertive, you can take deliberate action towards your goals, towards goals that you really, really wish to pursue. Possibly resulting in less angry explosions and outbursts. Because one of the challenges, I guess, with having Aries in the 12th is that it could suggest, it can be about inner frustrations, repressed anger, not speaking up or not doing a certain thing, doing a certain activity. And then what that can maybe result in are these angry outbursts. And then it can seem like they come out of nowhere, but you know exactly where they're coming from. There's just something here about exploring your will, exploring your drive, exploring your wants, the types of goals you wish to pursue is what I'm trying to get at. And at the same time, it's through this analysis that you can learn spiritual lessons, spiritual lessons to do with action, to do with self-assertion. I'm even thinking about how Saturn coming into the 12th house for you and Neptune coming into the 12th house for you from about 2026 for a few years, that could be very telling, could really highlight these types of themes as well. With that being said, locate Mars, because Mars is going to add so much more to this. It's going to speak more to this type of energy for you as well, and the spiritual lessons associated with it. Thank you kindly, Taurus Risings. And now we're going to move on to Virgo Risings. All right, Virgo Risings, let's discuss these emotional houses for you. Notice here that you have fire signs within the emotional houses, really adding themes of passion and enthusiasm and, well, self-expression tied to your emotions, your emotional landscape. All right, firstly, you've got Sagittarius here ruling the 4th, this Jupiter influence ruling the 4th. What this suggests about you is that you long for a living situation where you feel free. You feel free, open to explore. You seek for your loved ones to understand your opinions, beliefs, and morals. Doesn't mean that they have to agree with them, but there is some kind of common decency there, where it's not super dogmatic, it's not super excessive, where people are having to maybe dominate the conversation, right? And this is interesting to me because what could be a part of your life path here, Virgo Risings, is that as soon as you could leave the home, as soon as you could travel, you did. Maybe it's that you have lived in different countries throughout your life. You've stayed in different countries. I know for myself, I have a Virgo rising. I stayed for a period of time in the United States of America and in Canada and also Australia. And I find a lot of comfort in those kinds of situations, a lot of solace in those situations and those destinations. So there could be something here about travel being comforting to you. It's that freedom that is present there. And it could also be suggested for you, Virgo risings, that wherever you live, you need to feel like there's space, like there's light, windows, plenty of room basically to roam, to learn. I mean, I know myself, I have my bookcase, got my books there. I have all of my all of my different trinkets and bits and bobs around the house that I find to be really comforting. And then I have this big window that's letting in a lot of light right now. Yeah, I would say that I feel like there's plenty of room to breathe here and there is freedom here. And that makes me feel safe. So indeed, you want to consider this for yourselves, Virgo risings. Having said that, do locate Jupiter because Jupiter is certainly going to add more layers to this information. Okay, moving on. Let's think about the 8th house. You've got Aries in the 8th house, this Mars influence ruling the 8th. So with intimacy and closeness comes the part of you that reacts quickly, instantly, because deep down, You feel like you must defend yourself or be protective of yourself. Such feelings could very well stem from this refusal to be seen as vulnerable or as weak or as incapable. Oh, yeah. And so, what this can imply is that within intimate relationships, there could be a part of you that is triggered, like triggered to really defend your independence, defend your will, to just be defensive in general. And then I get curious a little bit about your past and your upbringing and any kind of volatile, combative influences mixed with those strong the strong dogmatic views, basically, and the strong opinions growing up. I wonder about that. And then I wonder about the part of you that might feel like you have to test other people. Maybe you don't trust very easily. And that could be for some really valid, obvious reasons. But still, Aries in the 8th, I think, speaks to this transformative process. All right. Speaks to maybe exploring any repressed anger or any inner frustrations, anything about want, will, drive, sexuality, right? Expressing your sexuality, enjoying even sex, right? All of these types of things could come into focus and be transformed. And it's this self-analysis too, right? You being a bit of a pioneer when it comes to exploring your own psychology, and then that can lead to greater self-awareness and everything else. Which, by the way, I mean, greater self-awareness doesn't necessarily always mean beneficial or positive, because with greater self-awareness could come more issues too. I just want to highlight that. Maybe you know what I'm talking about, Virgo Risings. Still, look at Mars. Mars is certainly going to point toward what this information is tied to more so. Finally, then, let's think about Leo. Leo is hanging out in the 12th, the sun influence ruling the 12th. Virgo risings, by integrating parts of the self that are fun, loving, and heartwarming, you can embrace your inner child and your creativity, leading to more enjoyment and pleasure in your life. Yes, yes, yes. This is actually where you really become so warm, so loving, so affectionate. I think a big part of it is about embracing the inner child and integrating the parts of yourself that didn't get to express yourself as a child. Right? There's something to get curious about here when it comes to enjoyment, pleasure, entertainment, fun, letting your hair down from time to time. And, with the 12th house, sure, it also speaks to the kind of people we become when there is some kind of substance involved. You could be a lot more fun and carefree in this way, living life to the fullest. But still, what we want to think about is integrating these parts of you in a way that's more everyday, and it doesn't have to be where you're under the influence to do that, right? That hopefully that's the aim here. So yes, this is what we see as a part of your own spiritual journey, Virgo risings. Finally, though, locate the sun. Oh yeah, the sun is going to shed more light on this information. Thank you kindly, Virgo risings. And now we're going to discuss Aquarius risings. Okay, Aquarius risings, these emotional houses for you. Let's get into this. Notice how you have the earth signs in these emotional houses, really adding layers of security and stability, being rational, using common sense. So you've got Taurus here in the 4th, this Venus influence ruling the 4th. And what this suggests about you is that you possess a need to feel at ease amongst your loved ones. Anything unstable, anything unfamiliar is enough to set you off. There is a level of consistency you long for within your home, right? So I want you to really think about that, because Uranus has been traveling through the 4th house from 2018 to about 2025, 2026. So what this can suggest about your family life, about your home, is that of things being inconsistent, unstable, feeling insecure, feeling a bit like, oh my gosh, panicked. What are we going to do? It's that type of disruptive energy here. At the same time, yes, we see innovation, we see change, going beyond the familiar, and maybe exploring alternatives. So that is also present. But still, with Taurus here ruling the fourth, this does speak to, like I'm trying to get at, your very need for ease. And so if things are too chaotic, too off balance, or too disruptive, then this could be where you reassess, you review your very living situation. And then you might think to yourself, I cannot deal with this. Or it could be a matter of things coming at you unexpectedly outside of your control. And then you're trying to find your sort of your grind in that. You're trying to find your own sort of steadiness in that. Still, this is what we're getting at here. It's about what is familiar, what is comfortable for you, truly. So with that in mind, you want to locate Venus, okay? Locate Venus to see how this information maybe differs, or, what could be adding to this information. And then whenever we move on to the 8th house, notice that Virgo is ruling the 8th house. You've got this Mercury influence ruling the 8th. So what this implies is that intimacy may not be the easiest thing for you to do, due to your difficulty with letting go. But still, it's your close relationships that bring out your fault finding, worrisome, and nerve-wracking behaviors, the panic mode thing. So this is really interesting to me, because what this can suggest with the Virgo influence in the 8th house is you could be really quite stuck in your ways. And this is where we see the tiniest issue maybe being raised as a major concern, where you might go to the extreme. You might highlight a point over and over and over and over. You drill that point home, you drill it into other people's minds. Maybe because a part of this is tied to possibly your own lack of security, or times whenever things need to be in control, they need to be organized. Yeah, this is where we see your inner critic. This is where we see themes of perfectionism and maybe taking things too far. Now, to maybe think about this on a more perhaps beneficial note, yes, we also see this striving influence within you to make things better, to improve systems, to improve how things function, how things operate, being able to notice any errors, any flaws, correct those things, major problem solvers. And it's perhaps within your intimate relationships that all of this stuff really comes out, right? It comes out. And this stuff could also be tied to your own fears of vulnerability, possibly. Yeah. Still, locate Mercury, because Mercury can add more to the story. All right. Though finally, let's think about Capricorn in the 12th, Saturn ruling this 12th house area. Here's the thing, Aquarius risings. By integrating parts of the self that are constructive, you can set realistic boundaries for yourself and others, leading to less control and greater freedom. Oddly enough. Yeah, it's really interesting to me, because having Aquarius on the rising, it can suggest that, sure, you are all about your freedom, you're all about progress, and you're all about having your space, being independent, free thinking, all of that stuff. But yeah, Capricorn in the 12th house sort of serves as this symbol of, okay, freedom also comes with responsibility. Freedom also needs to involve limits, boundaries. And it makes sense because if you're far too focused on freedom to such an extent that there's no rules, it's all just chaos, it's all just anarchy, nothing makes sense, then that could also show up as things being too messy, too out of control. And then there's not actually any freedom in that in the end. So Capricorn, I feel it kind of anchors you, reminds you to anchor yourself, in the present. Even Taurus could speak to this honestly as well, to come into the body and to try to set yourself, like I'm trying to get at with Capricorn in the 12th, realistic standards, realistic expectations. Indeed. With that being said, locate Saturn, because Saturn is going to certainly add more to this. Thank you so much, Aquarius Risings. And now we are going to move on to Gemini Risings. All right, Gemini Risings, let's explore these emotional houses for you. How might they show up? Notice here that you've got the earth signs in these houses, speaking to familiarity, consistency, and practicality regarding your emotional landscape. So you've got Virgo here in the 4th house, this Mercury influence ruling the 4th, suggesting what? Suggesting that you feel closer to your loved ones when your intellect and words are heard and nurtured. Likewise, you feel a need to improve your living situation, which helps you feel safe and secure. So what we see here, for instance, is your family really instilling this improvement within you, this ability to problem solve or to make sure that you are performing to the best of your ability. And this could have been, for instance, you getting good grades at school. Maybe that was important to your family, to your parents, or maybe it was about teaching you cleanliness, teaching you hygiene, really good forms of hygiene, or organizational skills could have been passed on to you as well in this way. Maybe you even grew up with a certain parental figure who was very organized or very much concerned about hygiene and cleanliness and order within the home. Now, it could also be then that within your own home, when it comes to your family, it's this organization, it's this improvement or this hygiene that you need in order to feel secure within yourself. And so you might go into a panic, you might freak out a little bit or worry. You might worry yourself whenever things are not to your standard, your practical standard. Maybe you just have a certain order, a certain way of doing things. And so the second that that order is disrupted, things could feel a little bit chaotic in your view, or you might be super concerned until you manage to fix whatever the situation is. Now, with that being said, you want to locate Mercury. So Mercury is going to add more to this story. Mercury is going to provide more themes to do with your family life, your home life, your emotional conditioning. But then we come to this Capricorn influence in the 8th house, this Saturn influence ruling the 8th house. What this implies is that it is difficult for you to open up and be vulnerable with others. There's a rigidness present, a stiffness you feel towards intimacy. Such things might stem from, could be high expectations felt throughout your younger years. It could be, for example, getting it wrong. It could be, for example, worry about connection, about closeness, about opening up. Maybe there are certain fears of vulnerability present here, but yet at the same time, it could be suggested that throughout your life, as you mature, you learn more about vulnerability, you learn more about your own blockages, your own limitations, how you might build walls around you when it comes to intimacy and closeness and establishing greater depth. And then this is equally tied to your own emotional transformations. Could also be some things to do with your father, a father figure, whether this be the absence of a father figure, the loss of a father figure, or challenging relationship with a father figure or with a grandparent, even possibly with Capricorn. So whatever the case may be, there could be these themes to do with father influences that you have experienced throughout your life that have kind of influenced the ways in which you connect and relate to others on a deeper level. And so that within itself could be quite the psychological, emotional journey for you throughout your life. With that in mind, locate Saturn. Oh yeah, Saturn is going to certainly add more to this story, many more layers to this story for you. Finally, let's think about Taurus. So Taurus is here hanging out in the 12th, Venus naturally ruling this 12th house area. So by integrating the parts of yourself, the parts of the self, that are essential and desirable, and by letting go of control, you can connect with others with more emotional intelligence. Yes, this could be, for example, about pleasure and maybe addressing any themes or blockages in the past to do with pleasure and comfort and greater ease in your life. And so by allowing these types of things more so into your life, by integrating them, maybe this is where we're going to see greater depth, greater intimacy, greater emotional ties in your life. And hey, you know what? At the same time, I'm also thinking about how with Taurus in the 12th, it could speak to you being very much set in your ways, stuck in your own habits, your own routines. And then it is about maybe exploring times whenever those things can maybe keep you from establishing a closer bond, a closer relationship. Could also be maybe themes to do with money and wealth and materials and the hedonistic sort of tendencies to do with Taurus here. But then again, another way to maybe interpret this is to consider, okay, well, comfort, grounding yourself, great, like I'm trying to get at, it's greater ease and maybe greater calm, where you're not having to put as much pressure on yourself. You're not having to look at every single waking moment as an opportunity to gain results. It's more about enjoying what you have, being pleased, being content with life. And maybe it's this greater sort of ease and relaxation that actually, in a way, helps you establish bonds where it feels more simple. It doesn't feel as harsh. With that being said, you want to locate Venus, because Venus is going to certainly speak to more of this. It's going to possibly contradict what I'm saying to an extent, or just add more information to this placement for you. Thank you so much, Gemini Risings. And now we're going to move on to Libra Risings. Okay, Libra Risings, let's explore these emotional houses for you. How might they show up in your life? Keep in mind that you do have earth signs within these houses, really adding themes of consistency, practicality, sensuality as well, connecting with your body when it comes to your emotional world, right? Thinking about your body sensations, for example. Okay. Let's think about how you have Capricorn ruling the 4th. You've got this Saturnian influence ruling the 4th. And so what this suggests is that you experienced a home life, a family life of hardships growing up. There was possibly an automatic expectation to be responsible. And so you might very well long for structure and stability. Now, there, of course, is more nuance to this, and that could also be where the placement of Saturn certainly comes into effect. You want to think about where Saturn is located. But still, with Capricorn here in the fourth, sure, for some of you, it could show up as your family life feeling more restrictive, more barren, more cold, more kind of empty, if you will, more like the home felt more like a tomb, right? Because the people within the home didn't feel very supportive. Parental figures were more strict, were more stern. Then again, it can also play out as things just being difficult, right? And, you know, if we think about, for instance, people having to simply get on with things, there wasn't enough time for emotional connection. There wasn't enough time for emotions to be validated. It was more about, okay, we just have to get through, we have to get by, right? So this is where we're noticing nuance. I mean, another possibility here is that for some of you Libra risings, you grew up without a father figure. There was no father figure within the home, or it's that a certain parental figure was very restrictive, or there was the absence of a parental figure in some way, shape, or form. And so that could have maybe left you feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to fend for myself. I have to look after myself. I have to be self-sufficient. I have to rely on myself. This, though, what I'm trying to get at with this is you can still learn so many valuable lessons about that. I mean, I consider your ability to overcome this type of family hardship, family adversity, and that could also equivalent to you having this very strong resilience, and you being so determined as a person. Again, locate Saturn. Saturn is going to speak more to this. Saturn can maybe add more layers of this burdensome feeling, or it could be more about this feeling of accomplishment, this feeling of achievement, right? Because there is this type of accomplishing influence, energy to do with Capricorn. And so this could imply, for example, throughout your life, working hard, working on your family situation, working on your living situation. And then there's so much success, there's so much victory that comes from that. Okay, moving on. You've got Taurus in the 8th house, this Venus influence ruling the 8th. When becoming intimately involved with another, you seek security, loyalty, right? You seek to maybe go steady, or this type of steadfast influence, the staying power influence, commitment. But you might also go to the extreme as you stubbornly hold onto what works for you, your personal desires, your personal earnings, your personal money. For you, this can lead to stagnation within such relationships. So one way to maybe consider this is, sure, this could be where you're so set in your ways when it comes to intimacy, and you would rather not go to certain depths, so to speak. You would rather not get into certain vulnerable areas. Maybe because a part of it is too much. It's too much to handle, or too much to get into. Or it could be that you take more of a kind of rational stance where you rationalize certain emotions, certain bigger things. Or it could be more about, okay, you choosing to be more sensual, calming, and soothing and comforting within intimate relationships, right? It's almost like it's through these intimate connections that you are possibly able to be vulnerable, but that is about establishing trust over time, right? Because what I think about, you're not going to just spill everything. You're not just going to share everything to someone that especially you don't know. It's about that consistency. When intimate partners, when close friends, whoever it is, when they show up in consistent ways, then that could be where, okay, you're ready to move forward with the emotional stuff. That could also then be linked to your own personal sort of transformations, or exploring your own unresolved traumas. Locate Venus though, all right, because Venus is certainly going to add more layers to this. But finally, let's explore Virgo. Virgo is here in the 12th, this Mercury influence ruling the 12th. Libra risings. By integrating room for improvement and change, you can recognize what is or is not working, hopefully leading to more harmonious relationships, even if you end a relationship. So if you can imagine, Virgo here is acting as this archetype of discernment. It's something that is happening, functioning within the background here, within your sort of subconscious. The hidden self is trying to teach you a thing or two about using healthy discernment, improvement, figuring out, okay, is this healthy? Is this not healthy? Being able to maybe filter your experiences through this stuff, through this kind of, okay, well, I've analyzed this, I've looked at this, I've addressed this. This to me makes sense because if you've got Libra on the rising naturally, then there is a type of weighing out process to do with Libra, right? Think about the scales of justice that signifies your ability to weigh out your options, your ability to weigh the pros and the cons when making a certain decision. And so maybe Virgo serves as the symbol of, okay, well, how healthy are these options? How healthy are these decisions? What is truly a con? What is truly a pro? And so this could be where change, like I'm trying to get at, healthy, hopefully healthy change can come into effect when it comes to even exploring your emotions, maybe diving into the past a little bit, diving into the certain cycles, certain fears, those vulnerabilities. Still, you want to further consider the placement of Mercury, because Mercury is certainly going to add so much more to what I am saying. Thank you so much, Libra Risings. And now we're going to move on to Pisces Risings. All right, Pisces Risings, let's explore these emotional houses for you. So notice here that you have the air signs in these houses, showing some kind of intellect and communication that comes into your emotional landscape. Interestingly, yeah, this is going to be an interesting one, especially because we are now going to be discussing the water rising signs, right? Though, let's begin by looking to this Gemini influence in the 4th house, Mercury ruling this house. What this suggests about you, Pisces risings, is that you might have lived in 2 different locations, 2 different houses, 2 different places growing up at once. Or it's that is what you do later on in life, right? Where you go between homes, you go between locations. And that could also naturally play out as moving between 2 different destinations that are far away from each other. I mean, that could be a possibility. Even though this is Gemini involved, there could be that kind of movement present. Possibly as well, this could be due to your relatives or your feelings of restlessness, having loved ones who nurture your inquisitiveness is emotionally satisfying here. So what I'm getting from this basically is that maybe you were raised in a household in which family was apart, right? Certain family members were apart or separated. Or maybe, for example, you would go to live with cousins on the weekend or during the week and then maybe come back to siblings, right? It really does depend on your personal sort of situation here. I'm even thinking about going to your aunt or uncle's house at the weekend and then staying at your own house during the week. And again, I can't help but think that this could be about even bringing in different cities, different countries, possibly. Excuse me. So there is that. And at the same time, we see that your mind, your intellect being nurtured. Like I'm trying to get at your curiosity, being nurtured. These things make you feel safe. This is what makes you feel comfortable. It's having, for example, a space where you can chat, where you can express yourself, you can share your feelings and your thoughts with other people. And then that within itself suggests more of a closeness, more of a closer bond with others. And maybe this is also something that was learned, a learned sort of behavior, maybe through a parental figure, a caregiver, for example. Though you need to locate Mercury, okay? Because Mercury is going to add more to this. Moving on to Libra. So Libra is located in the 8th house. You've got this Venus influence ruling the 8th house. What this implies is that when you become close and intimate with another person, you tend to use your charm, your beauty, your agreeability, perhaps your agreeableness, or your elegance to create this cooperative union, right? Where you can relate, you can bond, perhaps more so intellectually. There is a sort of cooperative, collaborative influence happening here. However, if you feel like there is an imbalance, right? Something's off balance, you might turn into this judge so that balance can be restored. Yes. If something comes up and it's maybe very rude, rash, it's not kind, yes, these parts of you could come out where you stand for fairness, you stand for justice, you stand for truth. And this could show up then within your intimate relationships, is what I'm trying to get at. Maybe your intimate relationships, they do require a give and take, a back and forth. A lot of major discussions are had, especially regarding more serious subjects, controversial areas, taboo-like topics come into this as well. Now, what you also want to consider is locating Venus naturally, right? So Venus is going to shed more light on what I am saying here. But still, when we consider more of this transformative process to do with any emotional blockages, emotional issues, perhaps it is through others that things are mirrored back at you, reflected back at you, especially regarding anything that might be off balance within yourself. And that within itself could require this analysis and could be it could be a part of a much bigger process. Finally, let's think about Aquarius in the 12th. This Saturnian Uranus influence ruling the 12th. Interestingly, Pisces risings, by integrating parts of the self that are inventive and experimental, you can approach situations differently, especially situations that don't work. And you can also free yourself. So if there is any sort of conflicted messaging, contradictions, untruths, facts that don't add up, or if you feel like you're constantly trying to balance things and it's too much, maybe this is where the Aquarius part of things comes in, where you're able to maybe look at things in a different light. And that could require possibly some deeper analysis, deeper investigation into maybe your subconscious fears, drives, motivations, things like that. Could also be a case of exploring relationships in a new way with fresh eyes. Or this could be about you assessing what your opinions are about certain social issues, certain social concerns. About that, maybe your mental health is a big priority here in this way. And again, I'm thinking that it's about being somewhat curious. Now, the last thing I'm going to say, though, is I'm further thinking with Aquarius there, it could highlight some feelings of alone, right? Feelings of loneliness. feelings of being alone or fearing being alone, fearing being lonely, that came through as well for you Pisces risings. Naturally, what you want to do is locate both Saturn and Uranus for more information, because they are going to certainly add more themes. Even Uranus could speak to eureka moments, epiphanies, awakening kind of moments. Naturally, I think about a spiritual awakening. I think about epiphanies that set you off on a whole new path, possibly throughout your life, maybe regarding relationships and closeness and vulnerability. Thank you so much, Pisces risings. Now we're going to move on to Cancer risings. Okay, Cancer risings. Let's explore these emotional houses for you. Notice how you have these air signs in these emotional houses, adding themes of communication, being sociable, relating maybe to others emotionally, getting feedback from others about emotions, things like that. So you've got Libra here in the 4th house, ruling this house, this Venus influence. So what this suggests about you, Cancer risings, is that you seek to set up a living situation that is peaceful, that is harmonious and cooperative. Establishing harmonious relationships within the home brings you inner ease and balance. So you're going to feel calmer and more regulated, perhaps, whenever you're in an environment, a living situation where family members, they get along, right? Things are not too aggressive. Things are not too harsh. There's not a lot of conflict. There's not a lot of drama and arguments. Now, with that being said, naturally, this could also be where any type of dispute is enough to perhaps throw you off balance. And then that could also be coming from a place of possibly fearing conflict or not aiming to resolve a conflict because you don't want it to escalate. You don't want it to become something that it shouldn't really be. But yet it's these types of perhaps subconscious, it could be fears, honestly, these subconscious fears that could be keeping you from maybe growing or from experiencing more fruitful, genuine types of relationships within your family. So that is one way to think about this. But then again, this could also show up as this is something that you simply value. This is something that you simply prioritize when it comes to people's emotions and things like that. Yet to you or for you, it is important that people within the home, they feel like things can be resolved and it doesn't have to turn into this big, massive, argumentative thing. Maybe this also comes from a place of deep protection, protecting your loved ones, or this could come from a place of looking to the past and your own kind of family, right, towards your own family and your own upbringing and how things were maybe managed there. And yes, to some extent, we could look at this in a more beneficial light of, okay, your family upbringing reflected back at you, right? Let's try and strive to cooperate together, to reach an agreement together. But another way to think about this is it's questioning what was maybe swept under the rug, what was avoided. What was avoided because nobody wanted to disrupt the peace. It's a question of this stuff. Still, what you want to think about is locating Venus, because Venus is going to certainly add more to this, so much more to this. So, moving on to Aquarius. Oh, and sorry, another thing with Venus or Libra in the 4th house, I want to highlight this other thing. It could have been a situation where you acted as the mediator. You act as a mediator within your family, within your home. Maybe you did that between your parents, because what I visualize, for instance, is a divorce could have happened, a separation could have happened, maybe family conflicts were happening, and so you were the mediator, you were the peacekeeper. So it's a question of, are you like that basically within your home, even whenever you have a family of your own? Okay, Aquarius, you've got Aquarius ruling the 8th, the Saturn, Uranus stuff happening, ruling the 8th. So there is an urge, I think, within you that stands for freedom. which you might subconsciously feel, right? But it also blocks you from establishing true intimacy, deep intimacy. There could be some fears of really connecting on a deeper level here, in that maybe you can approach things very rationally or conceptually, possibly because there were needs from your past that were not met, which you might carry into the future. So it could be more of this analysis. So running these emotional matters, deeper connection, intimacy, you run those matters through the mind, through this more intellectual process, through the database, so to speak. With that being said, this is not necessarily to say that this is a wrong way to be either, right? Because I also think that this can suggest, okay, there is more of a desire to want to bond over intention, choosing one another, respecting each other's independence, respecting each other's freedom. There is that. But if it goes to the extreme where maybe you are not opening up or sharing, or you're keeping things in, that can often happen with Cancer risings, right? Where you keep a lot in and you don't communicate, you're not being honest, you're not being vocal about how you truly feel, then that's where we're going to see these issues arise. And again, that's what I'm trying to get at. These types of things could stem from something deeper, maybe unmet needs, maybe because what was passed on to you is that your needs don't matter anyway. So why would they matter later on in your life, right? It's this type of thing. Yeah. What also comes through a little bit here is the whole thing of the archetype of Cancer and how Cancer can cling or hold on, even whenever deep down you're feeling dissatisfied, you're feeling unfulfilled. So that's also something to consider. How much might you maybe rationalize, right? So always rationalizing your feelings, rationalizing them away. Yeah, something to think about. But you want to locate Saturn and you want to locate Uranus for more information. Keep in mind that, yeah, there could be sudden changes that occur, awakening moments. There could be these epiphanies that occur, and those types of things lead to transformation. So lastly, let's think about Gemini. So Gemini is here ruling the 12th house, this Mercury influence ruling the 12th house. Basically, Cancer risings, by integrating the parts of the self that are communicative, right, and adaptable, adjusting to change, you can articulate your needs and in a way that others can understand you better. Because that could be a big thing here. It's just a case of maybe communication can be the challenge. But then it could also be the fear of backlash when you communicate. And it could also be a case of questioning, okay, am I safe to communicate? Do I feel like I can really connect with somebody else in a way where they're not going to judge me for this, they're not going to shame me for this, they're not going to ridicule me for this, right? It's these types of things. It's like running, again, like I'm trying to get at, you're running the emotional world, your feelings through more of the mind. And then Gemini in the 12th could suggest this kind of like, I don't know, what do I say? It's this type of thing. But yet there's so much going on in here, and there's so much being felt within yourself too. This is a process. I'm not here to give you some some black and white, some instant fix. No, you have to think about how this information resonates with you. You have to locate Mercury as well, so on and so forth, right? This is about exploration with Gemini in the 12th. Yes, locate Mercury for more information. Thank you so much, Cancer Risings. And now we're going to move on to Scorpio Risings. All right, Scorpio Risings, let's explore these emotional houses for you. How might they show up in your life? Notice here that air signs are ruling these houses, highlighting themes of intellect, maybe rationalizing emotions and communicating them, talking them through, things like that. So, you've got Aquarius ruling the fourth house, the Saturnian Uranus combo, sort of co ruling this house. What this suggests about you, Scorpio risings, is that you tend to march to the beat of your own drum when it comes to your living situation. Perhaps you have been independent from a really young age, very much an individual within your family or an individual that is separate from your family. Here's the thing, Scorpio risings, maybe you have often looked at your family as really chaotic or as if to say, I'm not a part of this. How is this my family? I don't get it. You could feel really alienated or just like you don't fit in, you don't belong. Or it could be that you've been maybe the outcast of the family, you've been the rebellious one, maybe you're the scapegoat in some way, shape, or form, or seen as problematic within your family, right? These are the types of themes we're looking at here. Now, with that being said, there's also a suggestion here of you maybe being raised by a parental figure, a caregiver who was quite eccentric, quite unique, maybe instilled this thing to do with you thinking for yourself, making life decisions based on your own freedom, your own independence, right? This is the type of stuff that we're seeing regarding your emotional conditioning and your family life, Scorpio risings. Now, what you want to think about too, is locating both Saturn and Uranus, right? So Saturn and Uranus is going to add so much more to this. Particularly when we think about Uranus, Uranus does speak to disruptions and those chaotic themes. And so this could be where you want to track Uranus to maybe see, well, what kinds of disruptions occurred within your living situation amongst family members. What comes to mind is one example. So one example could be suddenly, I don't know, where certain family members coming into the home or unexpectedly family members leaving the home. And then there's that shock value involved, the disruptive qualities involved, which I'm sure these themes were not stable. And think about it, children need a stable, secure home. But anyway, locate those planets. Next up then, let's look to Gemini. So Gemini is ruling the 8th house. You've got this Mercury influence ruling this house. What this suggests about you Scorpio risings is that getting close to someone requires mental stimulation. Oh my goodness, they need to be on your sort of mental wavelength, if you will. I just think for Scorpio risings, intimate partners who are dim, who don't have much to say, I think that could possibly be a major turnoff. Or you might not really bother with that relationship. But then the other thing is there needs to be this type of investigation into the psyche, their psyche. And sure, this might not be intentional or conscious. This could be more of a subconscious thing. You might subconsciously just penetrate the minds of intimate partners. I mean, you can already be like this, very much interested in subjects and topics that are more taboo, more controversial. You see the truth for what it is rather than trying to sugarcoat the truth, right? You're not the types of people, I don't think, who are going to sugarcoat things. You're basically going to be a lot more direct and to the point and concise in your messaging, and you're also most likely going to mean what you say. So yeah, there is that. And here's the other thing. If something does not make logical sense, you might detach and cut off any emotional closeness that you once had. It's a fascinating thing to consider, because with Scorpio on the rising, there is depth, there is intimacy here that you're craving. That's what you really crave as people. But the minute that maybe somebody discredits you, belittles you, judges you, right? This is where you can just go, okay, done, right? It can really be that sharp and that direct. You can be quite blunt. Let me put it that way. Though you want to locate Mercury, okay? Because Mercury is going to really add so much more to intimacy and closeness, and it's going to speak more to those emotional transformations too. It's actually through, I think, more of this effective communication within intimate relationships that you transform. It's almost like your mind can also change through intimate relationships, but I'm also thinking it has to be in some way on your terms. And even if things happen and it's not necessarily on your terms, it's still about feeling like you were in control of that. All right, so finally, you've got Libra here. Libra ruling the 12th house, Venus basically ruling this house. Here's the thing, Scorpio risings, by integrating parts of the self that are cooperative and mediative, that are collaborative, negotiating, right? These types of things, you can open a dialogue for profound change and greater emotional depth. What I'm trying to get at here is that you, Scorpio risings, can have your defenses, and that sometimes can cause or create this inability to really listen, collaborate, and gain feedback. So by integrating more of these Libran themes of collaboration and gaining feedback, what I'm trying to get at is this is where you can truly thrive more within relationships. Hey, it's not to say that you have to be like this with everybody, right? Because Scorpio risings, you can think in rather black and white ways. So I'm trying to add nuance to this for you. But what I am trying to get at is maybe a part of your own sort of psychological journey, maybe a part of your psychological journey is to do with actually taking in what is being said to you, what is being communicated to you from a place of greater collaboration. Yes. What you want to think about then is locating Venus, right? So Venus is going to certainly add more to this story. Thank you so much, Scorpio risings. And then we're going to move on to Aries risings. Okay, Aries risings, let's discuss these emotional houses for you and see here that the water signs are located in the emotional houses, really aligning basically with your emotional world, your emotional landscape, how maybe perhaps sensitive you can actually be here as people. So this leads us right on to Cancer. So Cancer is located in the 4th house. This moon influence is ruling the 4th. So what this suggests about you, Aries risings, is that you long to be cared for and supported, which you basically seek within your relationships. And from within the place you call home as well, right? So when it comes to your home, your living situation, family members, there is something here about you feeling nurtured, cared for, loved. There's affection. To feel you belong is what emotionally satisfies you. This is so much about your emotional safety, your emotional needs being met. And so this is about creating a space, a home, an environment where there is that safety, there is protection. We also see just how protective you can be of your loved ones. very protective of your family, especially protective of family members who you're close to. You cherish the moments. You cherish memories. Now, keep in mind that this can also extend to friends, immediate family members. This can extend to other people that you meet out there in the world, where you might create this safe environment for others. You might look at, for example, certain friends as family. Now, the other thing to add to this is that your very living situation could go through phases, could go through cycles, because equally, this could highlight maybe some challenging times, challenging moments with family, right? And then you still maybe striving to be protective or striving for things to get better, where there is that security felt. So what I'm trying to highlight here with the moon is that yes, phases can occur. So challenging phases could happen, but then more rewarding, fruitful phases could also happen. This is where you want to locate the moon in your chart for more information. And even sure, I would suggest looking to new moons and full moons and things like that in the chart if we think about transits. Okay, moving on to this Scorpio influence in the 8th house. Mars and Pluto co-ruling this house. The closer and more intimate you become with another, the more you realize how much you have suppressed and denied, possibly. And it's these complexes, these emotional complexes, that are connected with your upbringing and your childhood. So I think this is where really looking to the ruler of your 4th, so the moon, and the ruler of the 8th, Mars and Pluto, comes in. So for example, if you maybe grew up in an environment, a family life, where in which your needs were not met, they were not nurtured, they were not cared for, I am wondering about the kinds of turbulent, intimate relationships you might experience later on. Or, it doesn't have to be this black and white. If it is, for instance, that you experience maybe more turbulent relationships later on in your life, and within, those, basically within those relationship dynamics, if they are more combative or destructive, this could be where looking to family, looking to the home can be supportive for you. And maybe also a part of your transformative process is to do with trust. It's to do with closeness. This is where belonging, I think, comes in establishing those deeper bonds. But again, I further have to highlight that this is linked to your own personal attachments, your own emotional needs, and how you were cared for during your childhood. This naturally is going to require a lot of exploring your own chart, your own experiences, what's happening in your chart. Do you have anything in the 8th house there, anything in the 4th house there, so on and so forth. Yes, locate Mars and Pluto for more information, though I do think because there is a transformative process that happens in the 8th with Scorpio there, it could suggest your own resilience, your own courage, your own bravery, and so on, drawing from your emotional power. There could be this staying power you possess when it comes to intimacy, sticking through the challenging times, being in a relationship where you're able to go through those moments of loss and grief and so on. You're there to support one another. There could be that commitment that is involved. Or it could be that things were just so chaotic, destructive. It could be that you've maybe experienced a really ugly divorce in some way, shape, or form, or maybe shared finances have been used against you in some way, shape, or form in the past. This is what's coming to mind. Finally, let's look to Pisces. So Pisces is in the 12th. You've got this Jupiter-Neptune influence co-ruling the 12th house. Basically, Aries risings, by integrating parts of the self that are compassionate and soul-searching, parts of the self that are more tranquil and peaceful, Yes, stillness. You can find the strength that you need to fight through your darkest fears. Your darkest fears. What I'm getting from this is, if we were to think about this within the context of what I previously said, Pisces could serve as a symbol of you going on this journey of spiritual self-exploration, recovery, healing. Like I'm trying to get at compassion, self-compassion, self-forgiveness, leaning on others, knowing you can depend on certain loved ones to get you through. Could also be a case of battling certain addictions throughout your life, addressing any maybe emotional challenges, emotional blockages. And then that within itself highlights your fight, your bravery, your resilience. With that being said, locate both Jupiter and Neptune for more information. Thank you, Aries Risings. And now we're going to move on to Leo Risings. Okay, so Leo Risings, when it comes to exploring these emotional houses for you, notice how you have the water signs in those houses, really adding layers of sensitivity and great depth regarding your emotional needs. So let's begin by exploring Scorpio in the fourth, this Mars Pluto co-rulership of the fourth. What this suggests about you, Leo Risings, is that you go through many emotional transformations when it comes to your emotional security, your emotional needs, your comforts, and home, family. The intensity you feel towards your past and your family can be both overwhelming and debilitating. Now, it could also be a case of you drawing from your inner resilience, your inner power, your inner strength to consider, for instance, periods where you have been challenged or tested in some way by family themes, family patterns, and cycles. We also see then you being able to learn from those experiences, those past experiences. For example, what I think about is you growing in your own compassion, empathy, emotional awareness, emotional understanding. Trust could also be a big part of this. Knowing who to trust, who to avoid, knowing that you're safe within certain emotional settings, safe to open up, safe to be vulnerable. Because what I imagine here is that perhaps there are some themes to do with your vulnerability being threatened when you were younger. Not necessarily saying that this was an intentional thing. It could more so be that that is just what you felt based on maybe multiple factors, such as maybe a situation that happened amongst your parents. I even think about possibly a parental figure battling with addiction, battling with their own temptations. So yes, indeed, we see your emotional resilience, your emotional transformations. We also see this type of resilience regarding where you actually live, where you decide to possibly settle down. Could be a case of you intentionally moving away from a particular living situation that does not serve you anymore. It does not align with your emotional needs anymore. With that in mind, you need to locate Mars and also Pluto for more information about this stuff. Still, when we consider your emotional needs, they are strong. They are strong. And perhaps to some extent, they can come across as quite fixed at times. So this leads me on to Pisces, interestingly, because this is the 8th house we're going to move on to here. And Pisces is far from fixed, is much more fluid, much more adaptable. Yeah, so Pisces is ruling the 8th. You've got this Jupiter, Neptune influence co-ruling this house. It is likely that you lose yourself When you become close to another, your identity merges with those you trust. But if such people betray you, it feels like a self-betrayal. This is hard for you to accept. So I'm thinking that this speaks further to the intensity, to the extremes, to this overwhelming emotional stuff. But this also adds layers to do with assessing and investigating how you can hopefully separate in healthy ways. So if it is a case of you merging heavily and then losing yourself within the other, maybe assessing why that is, where that stems from, or if it is that there are these overwhelming, debilitating fears that come in, where there's the fear of vulnerability, there's the fear of closeness, there's the fear of opening up, equally investigating where that's stemming from, why that is. And then the other thing about this too is being mindful of falling into these patterns to do with intimate relationships that involve a lot of sacrifice, but sacrifice to such an extent that you lose yourself. This is what I'm trying to get at here. It's really interesting to consider because Leo is about individuality. Leo is about your self-expression, the ego. But yet, Pisces is the surrender of the ego. It's how the ego dissolves. So, I guess in a way, yes, we want to be mindful to the extent of which you do that. But at the same time, if it is that you feel a deep bond and it's genuine and it's true and it's clear and it's fruitful, but yet it's the lack of trust or fears that are holding you back from experiencing that depth, then again, this is what I'm trying to get at. It's about exploring, assessing why that might be. Certainly a fine balance in a way here. Still, locate both Jupiter and Neptune for more information. And the final thing we're going to look at, and this could be the final piece of the puzzle, if you will, is Cancer. So Cancer is ruling the 12th house. This moon influence ruling the 12th house. By integrating caregiving and nurturing qualities, you can develop healthy boundaries that help protect you from being heartbroken repeatedly. Yes. See, I think a big part of your spiritual journey here to do with Cancer in the 12th house, it speaks to your emotional needs. What was maybe overlooked or missed growing up? What did you crave, but you were dissatisfied? You were unfulfilled emotionally. What are you kind of starving for, so to speak, emotionally speaking? And it's a question of assessing maybe your family, your upbringing. And I'm thinking, because the moon rules this house, I'm thinking about phases. I'm thinking about certain cycles, certain family cycles, phases that come to an end, those karmic endings to do with the 12th house. And then what does this indicate? This actually indicates could lead to greater closeness, greater bonding, greater, healthier connections. But again, it's about that self-analysis. And the last thing I want to mention about this is one, yes, locate the moon for more information. And also I want to highlight that this is not about me saying that any one person or one thing is to blame or anything like that. I'm more so highlighting that there could have been certain needs that were not necessarily met for you, and that might not have been an intentional thing. It could have been more circumstances and events that were outside of your control and outside of your family's control. Thank you so much, Leo Risings. And then lastly, we are going to explore Sagittarius Rising. Okay, finally then, Sagittarius Risings. Let's explore these emotional houses for you. How might things play out? So, notice here that these emotional houses are comprised of water signs, really aligning with the element of water, suggesting sensitivity, emotion, and a lot of feeling here. So you've got this Pisces influence ruling the fourth house, this type of Jupiter Neptune co-rulership in the fourth house. All right. So what this suggests about you Sagittarius risings is that you seek after a living situation where you can escape from the world out there, a place of stillness, a place of tranquility, of peace, peace, a peaceful sanctuary. But yet there is a hazy kind of fog over your past family and home events. What I imagine, for example, is that you might believe certain things about particular family members, or you might believe that certain things played out in certain ways, right? In particular ways, but yet you might question your own judgment. You might even experience then self-doubt. Could be this cognitive dissonance that sort of occurs where you think, okay, well, logically, rationally, yeah, this is what happened, but maybe there's something off about how you're feeling. There's something that's a bit odd or strange, or just, yeah, something is off. And so what this can maybe lead to is more of this spiritual analysis, this spiritual investigation into, okay, well, what is true here? And maybe making peace with certain past events, making peace. It's not to say that you deny or that you pretend like they didn't happen. It's more about allowing for a certain chapter to come to a close. Yes. And then on that note, we want to be mindful of this part of you that might bury your head in the sand or avoid or paint things out to be so perfect, right? You might even romanticize the past. Like it was so perfect. It was so beautiful. It was so amazing. But maybe a part of that is because there's something deeper within you that's maybe a bit more challenging to identify with, or maybe a bit more difficult to identify with. Again, I'm what I'm trying to get at here is it really does depend on your personal situation. Still, regardless of really what happened in the past, I am saying this, that when it comes to your own living situation, your own sort of home life, there is a striving for, a craving for peace. And well, this within itself could be a part of your own spiritual journey to do with home. Okay, with that in mind, locate Jupiter, locate Neptune for more information about this. They're going to add a lot more detail. Okay, moving on to Cancer ruling the 8th house, this moon influence ruling the 8th house. Sagittarius risings, when you aim to establish an intimate connection, an intimate bond with another, you are presented with subconscious emotional patterns and habits that could very well hinder you from feeling secure and supported. It's these patterns, it's these habits that are linked to your childhood, your upbringing. What comes to mind here is you subconsciously bringing a lot of your past, a lot of your family stuff into your intimate relationships, but you might not be aware of this. You might not be aware that this is happening. For example, this could be themes to do with your mother, or how you were, so themes to do with your mother, or themes to do with how you were cared for, how you were nurtured. I imagine unmet needs coming into intimate relationships, or subconsciously looking to intimate partners to care for you, to nurture you. Again, you may not realize that this is happening. It could also be a thing of you craving that protection, protectiveness, security within these intimate relationships. And I'm also going to say this quickly. In my chart, using the Placidus system, very clear, the Placidus system, Neptune is in the 4th, making a square to the moon in the 8th in Aries. And I can, to some extent, identify with these types of themes. So basically what I'm trying to get at here, Sagittarius Risings, is I think your transformative process involves this psychological journey, if you will, to do with emotional habits, unmet needs, craving that emotional security, that connection, attachments. And then it is a question of how healthy are those emotional attachments. This is where the moon comes in, locating the moon in the chart, seeing what's going on there. And I'm also going to say that with the moon ruling the 8th house, we see phases, we see cycles, we see fluctuations, right? So, for instance, you could go through a certain phase within intimate relationships where maybe things are more emotionally overwhelming or maybe emotionally distressing and chaotic, but then you could come out of that. There could be a transformation. There is that resilience that happens too. Maybe that also is tied in with the past stuff. Looking to the family dynamics, looking to past situations that maybe are or were more difficult to address. Again, this could lead to a kind of transformation, is what I'm trying to get at. And also, you want to locate the moon itself, locate even new moons, full moons, exploring transits of the moon there for more information about those fluctuations and those cycles. Okay, finally, let's look to Scorpio. This could be our final sort of piece, our puzzle piece to this. So you've got Scorpio ruling the 12th. You've got this Mars-Pluto influence co-ruling the 12th. Basically, Sagittarius risings, by integrating a desire to unravel your deepest, darkest motives, drives, and so on, you can release certain emotions, which you never knew were there, creating growth, inner power, inner strength. And I believe this is something I've said before. It's not necessarily about going around and trying to find issues. I'm just more highlighting that within more of this psychological journey, this emotional journey, possibly a spiritual journey, you could learn about certain emotions that are sort of blocked. Okay, emotions that are repressed, denied, and then there is that ability to release, to go through those renewals, those transformations. Scorpio within itself is a sign of transformation. So we can look at this as, for example, certain karmic cycles, if you will, coming to a close. There's a finality type of thing. Or it's about accepting that certain hidden matters, secrets occurred. And maybe you do go to address those types of areas, but you also might get to a point where you fully respect or you fully accept that you don't have to go there anymore. Maybe that is also about, addressing self-sabotage cycles, self-destructive cycles. Now, with that in mind, locate Mars. Locate Mars, locate Pluto in your chart for more information. But we see this type of renewal, this renewable, regenerative process to do with these spiritual lessons. Again, these spiritual lessons could even be tied in with control, like being so stiff, needing to control everything. The fears that could come up here. the denial of certain events, the denial of certain fears, the fears of vulnerability. Maybe that's also partly what this Cancer influence in the 8th house speaks to. It's vulnerability could be a big part of your strength here. Naturally within a setting in which you feel safe. It's not about, of course, sharing every single vulnerable thing with everybody. It's more about, okay, if you want to experience an intimate connection, establish a deeper bond with other people, how might fears of vulnerability be keeping you back from getting there? Thank you so much, Sagittarius Risings. And with that being said, everybody, this has been the video all about the houses of emotion in astrology. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. And if you did find this video to be helpful, you can always buy me a coffee. And of course, if you found the video to be helpful, give the video a like and subscribe for more if you have not already. If you would like to book a reading with me, though, you can visit my website, hannahselsewhere.com. Thank you. With that in mind, everybody, I'm going to get going. And thanks so much again for being here. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks to the members of the Cosmic Warriors Club. I appreciate you. Stay tuned for more, everyone, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye.